So let's talk about a big idea. What if the best path to peace wasn't just through treaties, but through trade and development? That's the powerful concept at the very heart of Egyptian President Sisi's recent speech at the World Economic Forum. And today, we're going to break down his vision for linking prosperity directly to security.
Right from the jump, President Sisi frames this whole conversation around a shared goal. Now, in a world that feels full of friction, that kind of language is a very deliberate choice. It sets a tone of optimism and collaboration, suggesting we should focus not on our differences, but on building a collective future.
All right, we're going to follow Sisi's logic here in 5 parts. We'll start with the global challenges he lays out. Then we'll dig into his blueprint for peace, see how Egypt's own economic reforms fit into that puzzle, and finally, look at the big invitation he's extending to the world. It all builds up to that one central idea: creating peace through prosperity.
Okay, first up, the problem. To really get what Sisi is proposing, we first need to understand the world as he sees it, a landscape of really complex, interconnected challenges.
Sisi paints this picture of a world facing multiple storms all at once. You've got rising conflicts and a breakdown in the old ways of doing things internationally, but at the same time, you've got these huge technological shifts like AI, changing absolutely everything. His point is, these aren't separate issues. They're all tangled together, and they're actively making our world less stable.
So, if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? While Sisi argues it's not enough to just ride out the storm, you have to chart a whole new course. So let's take a look at his blueprint for peace.
Here it is, Egypt's 4-part plan. Now, the first 2 steps, dialogue and diplomacy, that's traditional stuff, right? That's the bread and butter of foreign policy. But look at steps 3 and 4, integration and empowerment. This is the real core of his argument. He's saying that peace treaties are fragile, they're just ink on paper, unless they're built on a solid foundation of shared economic opportunity. And for Sisi, any real talk about peace in the Middle East has to begin with one central issue. He basically argues that without a fair resolution to the Palestinian conflict, any other effort to build stability in the region is like building a house on sand. It's the key that has to turn before any other doors can open. He then points to recent events to show this isn't just talk. The Sharm el-Sheikh summit is presented as a major turning point, a moment where the focus shifted from just managing the conflict to actually trying to find a new political path forward, starting with a ceasefire and getting crucial humanitarian aid in.
And just to be crystal clear about the final goal, the speech reaffirmed Egypt's absolute commitment to a 2-state solution. It's not presented as just one option out of many, but as the only internationally recognized way to achieve a just and lasting peace.
But remember, diplomacy is only half of the equation. To make that vision of shared prosperity a reality, you need a strong economic engine at home. So now we're going to pivot from foreign policy to Egypt's pretty ambitious domestic reforms. So to power this whole vision, Egypt has been seriously overhauling its economy. The key strategy here, the government is intentionally stepping back to let the private sector step up. By limiting its own investments and getting out of certain industries, the state is making room for private companies to become the real engine of growth. And according to Sisi, these reforms are paying off. He's saying the data shows a positive trend across the board. The economy's growing, private investment is flowing in, and international institutions are noticing. They're upgrading the country's credit rating, which, is a huge sign of confidence for any global investor.
And Sisi was really keen to point out that this isn't just them patting themselves on the back. These improvements have been recognized by global institutions like the IMF, and that lends a whole lot of outside credibility to the path Egypt is on.
Okay, so you've got a more stable economy, you have a clear strategy for growth. What's the next logical step? Well, you send out an open invitation. And this is exactly where Sisi pivots from explaining reforms to actively looking for partners.
So, where exactly are the opportunities? This wasn't some vague call for investment. No, Sisi pointed to very specific, future-focused sectors where Egypt is ready to make a deal.
You can see the focus here is clearly on the industries of tomorrow. We're talking about everything from green energy and electric cars to AI and IT. The message is that these aren't just areas of interest, these are sectors where Egypt is actively rolling out the red carpet with special incentives for global partners.
But the pitch is bigger than just the Egyptian market itself. The idea is that Egypt can be a strategic gateway. With modern infrastructure, the super important Suez Canal economic zone, and a whole web of free trade deals, an investment in Egypt is being framed as a launchpad into the huge markets of both Africa and the Arab world.
And this brings us right back to the central theme, the one big idea that ties diplomacy, economic reform, and global investment all together into a single, coherent vision.
In his closing, Sisi drove the main point home. Security and development are not two separate things you work on. They are fundamentally intertwined. You can't really have one without the other. They are two sides of the exact same coin.
And so, we're left with this really compelling final question. In a world that's struggling with so much conflict, what if the most powerful tool for peace isn't actually a treaty, but an investment? What if shared prosperity is the one thing that can give everyone a real, tangible stake in a peaceful future?